This is Don Smith. I am a Sony artisan and a Stingray ambassador. And I'm here today for part 2 of our starry night shoot over Pinnacles National Park. My wife Barry and I were down there last Tuesday. We had a clear night. The moon was not up. It wasn't going to rise till 3:20 that morning. And it was all systems go for testing out a new lens that I had added to my night arsenal. And that's a Laowa, L-A-O-W-A, 15mm f2. And I also have 2 other lenses I use for night. I use a Sigma Art 20mm 1.4 and a Sony 24mm 1.4. Right now, Sony doesn't have anything down in the range of what I would call really fast night glass down in the 14mm range, but I'm certain that down the line they will be coming out with one. And when they do, I'll give it a test and we'll do a video. So what I want to show you in part 2 here is how I processed all of my 15 images. If you have not seen part 1, there's a link down in the show notes and you can go down there and check that out, where we actually take you on location up at Pinnacles. And now it's time to process. The other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to capture multiple frames to try out Starry Landscape Stacker. This is a program that I've used in the past, got away from, and I've reinstalled it. And it allows you to take images that are otherwise fairly noisy, captured at night, and give you, you shoot multiples and it realigns the stars for you and gives you a nice clean image. So we're going to check that out also. So I first have the first slide of the sequence up here, and you can see it actually almost looks a little overexposed. And let me talk about that very briefly. Let's come in here to the develop module and look at our histogram, and that's key. I see on my workshops, the key fault to most people is when they're shooting at night, they're only basing their judgment off of what they see on the back of their LCD and not taking in the account of a histogram. Histograms are so important to avoid underexposed images. Now, the other thing that's not talked about, well, it is talked about a lot out on the web, I see, is this thing called the 500 rule, the 600 rule. I think it might have started out, I don't know, the 500 rule. And what they tell you in that is to take the millimeter of your lens and divide it into that number, say 500. And that will tell you how long an exposure you can use before you start seeing any movement in the stars. I really don't think that's a valid rule, because as we shoot closer to the North Star, which would be far up in the right-hand corner, not even in this frame, but further right up here, the star rotation is going to get very slight, as opposed to when we shoot further away from the North Star, where the star rotation gets even more. So I think probably a better rule of thumb would to use something like the 300 rule, which is what I used in this shoot. And I took my 15mm, divided it into 300, and that gave me 20 seconds. And if you come under my histogram here, you're going to see that's what I shot at 20 seconds. Now, what you're not going to see is missing is the what aperture I had set. And I did shoot this lens wide open. Typically, I would stop these night lenses down about a stop to really give me better sharpness. And I know that's kind of counter to purchasing, let's say like a 1.4 lens, and now you're telling me to stop it down to 2.5 or f2 or something like that. Yeah, you'll just get a little bit sharper and not so much vignetting up here in the corner, and your coma is going to be a lot better. So there are reasons. Just you pay money for that fast glass, yeah, but then you stop it down a little. It's better than having an f2.8 lens and then having to stop it to f4. Now we're really having to ramp the ISO up and deal with a lot of noise issues. So I hope that makes sense. The other thing is, when you're shooting night, shoot in manual mode. So you have to be very comfortable with your camera in the dark, and that takes practice. Go outside at night, go in a dark closet, whatever. Know how to set your ISO, know how to change your aperture, and know how to change your shutter in manual mode in the dark. Night photography is something you do not want to do in any type of auto mode. Couple of items. The night we shot, you always want to check your weather, see what's going on. I knew we were going to have a clear night, and I knew the moon would not be up, so it'd be great for dark night photography. Now, in this scene, I am shooting from the from the east side of the Pinnacles, looking towards the west. And I think it's important to note when sunset occurs, and on that night it was 5:48, then we get into a twilight period. But I don't think what a lot of people realize is there's 3 stages to twilight. And the first one is what we call civil twilight. Sorry, lost my attention for a second. Civil twilight. And that is when the sun just goes below the horizon down to 6 degrees below the horizon. And that's on a clear day, that's a beautiful time to actually shoot. That's when you get the warm hues up in the sky. But it's not good for night photography. Then we go into what's called nautical photography, and that's a period when the sun is dropping between 6 to 12 degrees below the horizon. And I think the best way to illustrate that is I live out along the coast here in California, and you look out on a clear night, you can still see a warm band of light sitting out on the horizon. And then from there, we go into what we call astro twilight, and that is when things really get dark, and that's when the sun is 12 to 18 degrees below the horizon. Now, in civil twilight, our eyes can see colors fine. When we get into nautical twilights, for most of us, our cone receptors in our eyes do no longer work, and it's our black and white rod receptors. That's why we see everything in shades of black and white, and definitely by astro, everybody's is shut off. That crossover period in nautical varies with people. I know there are people with more cones. I read that we have thousands of cones in our eyes versus millions of rods. And just know the cones are the color transmitters, the rods are the black and white transmitters. Okay, let's get on to actually doing the processing. I'm going to select I have just this first frame selected. A couple of things I want to talk about. Let's come up here, we are now in the develop module. Get away from anything auto, even though I captured these frames in auto white balance. I like to go daylight. I like to see a little bit of blue. I think psychologically that just denotes nighttime as opposed to a warmer color. So I'm going to take this exposure and I'm going to back it way down, like to negative stop and 2¾ right here. You can see I still have a lot of room in the histogram here. Next thing, I'm going to come down to my whites, hold the Option or Alt key, and you can see just the bright whites there of the stars, and I think that's Venus, the big blob, but I'm not 100% sure. And as I pull to the right, you're going to start to see, obviously, the horizon come up. So I'm going to back it off just until that goes away, and I'm just seeing the whites of the stars. The blacks, I think, are fine. I'm going to come in here, and this is where the Sony sensors, gang. This was the A7R4. Look at what I can pull out of that foreground down in there. Now, I don't want to open it up to full daylight because that's not what my eyes were seeing. My eyes were seeing more kind of like that, and then really basically into nothing as we got into astro portion of the twilight. And we really did this shoot right at the end. We started doing these 15 frames right as nautical twilight was coming to a close, which was at that night, I believe, 55 minutes past sunset, and astro twilight was taking over. The other thing I want to do down here is come into my lens correction, and if I enable profile correction, you're going to see there's none. Well, that's because the Laowa Adobe does not have any type of profile for Laowa yet in there, and hopefully they will in further versions. So what I'm going to do is find something close with Sony FE, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to a 12 to 24, And yeah, you could see that some of the vignetting was reduced. And we're almost ready here to sync this all up. I think I'm going to cut these highlights down even more. And what that did was take that, let's see, let me bring it back up so you can see. Take any of that light around the horizon over the peaks down. And anytime I make a move, I always go back and I check my whites. There we go, right there. And we can now open these shadows a tinge more. I don't want to do it too much because, again, this is it look unnatural to see everything in there. Let's come down to our film strip and shift-click to highlight all of these. And we are going to click Sync. And that box will come up, and click Sync again. And watch the little film strip. You're going to see all of these now have turned kind of dark. I can just cycle through these. And you can see each frame, the stars are moving just a little bit. These were 20-second exposures, as I said. And then as soon as it was over, I had both my wife and I call out like 1 and then 2. So we wouldn't get confused and lose track. And the last thing now that I have to do is export these. So I'm going to come to right-click, Export, Export. And I already have a folder set up where I've exported these before I recorded this called Pinnacles Stars Synced. So you can set something up on your desktop and, put it into that folder. And the only other one you have to think about is here. Change your image format to TIFF. Color space, not sure if it's such a big issue, but I use mine. It's ProPhoto RGB. It's the widest gamut. That will change when I output. Compression, none. Bit depth, I'm going to leave it at 16. You probably could get by at 8, but why not? We'll leave it at 16. And then just click your export. I'm not going to do it now because I have already exported these images over to my folder on my desktop. So that's it. That's my prep in Lightroom. You can do this in Adobe Bridge. And now it's time to jump into Starry Landscape Stacker and see what that can do for us. Okay, so here we are now in the interface of Starry Landscape Stacker. And it's pretty basic. When you open it up, it's just, you're going to go find your pictures, which mine were put into this folder, Pinnacles Stars Synced, on my desktop. And there's my 15 TIFFs. So I'm just going to select those and open. And this will bring the images into Starry Landscape Stacker. And it's really pretty simple program. This is pretty new now. They're going to ask me to enter the millimeter of my lens. So we were shooting with that 15 millimeter. And maybe that's not new. I just don't quite remember it. Okay, so now you're going to see all the red dots are representing where the program thinks the stars are. And you can see some of them are down here in the foreground. So the first thing I want to do is come over here where it says erase red dots. And this is actually pretty clean. We're just going to kick over here, and really I don't see, oh, there's one right there I missed. Okay, other than that, it looks pretty good. And now I'm going to click on, let's see, Find Sky. And this is going to create a mask. It's going to be a little tricky, as you can see up here, because we've got peaks and we've got these gray pines that are up in here that are making things a little difficult. But we'll see. I'm not going to stress too much on that. I am going to paint out all of this area up in here. And we just want to paint all of this away to refine the mask, to let it know that there should be stars up in there. And I could come down in here. Again, I'm not going to stress too much about this because this was right on the horizon anyway, where it was fairly bright, if you recall. We were just getting into astro twilight. And I'll just come in here between these trees. Okay, so, all right. And now let's go up to the top left and hit Align and Composite. And let's see what it gives us. Okay, pretty cool. You can see almost immediately that just like jumps off the screen. So what I'm going to do, I want to save this out to the desktop. One thing I wanted to mention, this minimum noise, that would be found under this drop down. I think you get 6 choices. I just leave it at minimum horizon noise. And I haven't played with this enough to really tell the difference. You could go through and check on your own. I'm going to save this out. And this is asking me to save the mask, and I don't need to do that. Okay, so now what I want to do, I think we're done. Let me minimize out a Starry Landscape stacker. And I'm going to open up, here's the image, resulting image that's saved out on my desktop. And I'm going to open this up into Photoshop. And I already have one of the raw versions. So let me take this back down for you so you can kind of see the difference between the two, and then we're going to zoom in. Okay, I think you can see quite a dramatic difference. This is the raw, 1 frame of the raw sequence, and this is combined 15 frames. I mean, right in here, you're already starting to see more detail. Let's take the raw, and I'm going to blow it up. I'll just go up about 200%. Really, you know, at 100%, that's pretty much, if you're not seeing noise at 100%, you're not going to get it in your prints. I mean, I see these online tutorials that'll take these things up 400 and 500%. That's impractical in the real world. It doesn't really matter. I really view these things at 100%, so I could back it down. That's 100%. You know, but let's come on over here to the one that Starry Landscape Stacker did, and I think you can see it did. That's 200%. So let's just leave it at that. And let's go down and look down in here, and you can see very clean. We have a couple little just noise highlights or whatever artifacts down in there that we can clone out very simply. Let's come over to just one of our TIFFs here, and let's go up to 200 there, and you can see quite a difference in noise from there to there. So once again, I think the proof's in the pudding here in the sky. Even with a very clean frame that I had, this is still really the way to go. So I want to mention there are other ways of getting noise out of your images. A great one, and I'll put a link in the show notes, is Topaz Denoise AI, and I'll leave my code for a 10% discount. So if you felt like you had any noise issues you still wanted to deal with, you'd certainly run it through Topaz Denoise AI right now, and then you just finish out processing. But I'm really happy with the result of this image. I will do some final touches in processing. But that's how you do it from start to finish. Plan, get out there and shoot, enjoy the night sky, and then come back at your computer. And you have these techniques available now where you know how to get nice pinpoint registered stars with very little noise. And if you've never experienced night photography, it will open up an entire new world to you in the realm of landscape shooting, especially on blank blue sky days, which is once again what we're experiencing right now in California. So I hope that's it. Leave some comments down below if you have any questions. I will check. I don't check every day, but probably every other day I'll be in there to check, and I'll try to do my best to answer. And if you're interested in taking any of my workshops and learning more, we try to run night photography sessions as many of the workshops as we can. Sometimes we're blanked on weather. We were just out in Grand Canyon and we had a full moon up, so that really wasn't conducive to doing any type of star photography. But other than that, I do try to get a session or two in. And so if you're interested in my workshops for 2020, and we even got the first one for 2021 up, go take a look and send an email, don@donsmithphotography, and I probably Barry, my wife, will get back to you and we'll get you all taken care of and answer your questions. So until next time, this is Don Smith. Get out there, have fun with your cameras. This is what it's all about, and I hope this tutorial helped you out. Take care.